Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Mike, for presenting and maybe more introducing me here today. I apologize for keeping you on edge, but it was USA's fault, not mine. I don't know what was going on here today, but traffic was kept out of here for a while we sat on the ground in Columbia. And I see my staff is finally making it in. I think they were waiting in the office for me. I came directly here from the airport. And so my ears have not yet opened up, but they've been closed now for about 3 weeks, as I have spent every weekend for the past 4 weeks on and off airplanes, and I have one more week in this cycle to go. So if I sound a little bit funny, it's because I'm hearing strange noises in my ear, not my head. I want to thank Mike for being so kind with his introduction here today, but knowing that state senator, as I did know him, who drew these district lines, he had expert help and always relied upon Mike Coward to do what was right. And I'm very pleased that the end result of that creativity has been that I'm now concluding my 20th year in the United States Congress. Mike mentioned that I met my wife in jail, and I heard a snicker or two. I got an email a couple of weeks ago from somebody I really don't know who it was, because I told that story, but I was told I should complete it because they were not so sure that a few people didn't go away from that meeting thinking that I had been in jail for a less than honorable reason. But I will tell you that it works pretty good, because last June, Emily and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary, and it must be okay, because on the trip that I just came off of last night, she spent those 4 days with me down in Florida. I'm sure it had much more to do with some Native American reservations around there than the congressional districts I was down there working with. Mike mentioned I grew up in Sumter. My wife grew up in Moncks Corner. Moncks Corner is a little place about 30 miles north of Charleston. A lot of people think it got its name from the monastery that's there, but that's not quite true. It was named Moncks Corner for whatever reason before the monastery was established there. Maybe they were attracted to the area because of its name. But it is a very, very rural part of South Carolina, or at least it was when she was growing up. Now, I grew up in Sumter. Now, Sumter is the home of, when I was growing up, Shaw Air Force Base is now both Shaw Air Force Base and the Third Army. And it is very urban by South Carolina standards, by standards of the Northeast, maybe not so urban. But I point these out to you because Mike mentioned my understanding of the congressional district that I represent. And I want to tell you that because I want to make a point here today that deals with why I thought that it was so important for us to take an idea out of South Carolina and try to turn it in to a national program. Of course, we were successful in getting the House of Representatives to go along with it. But for real partisan reasons, I do believe that the Senate, most of the senators would agree. But we all know what kind of climate we are operating in up here right about now. But I'm not going to give up this fight, simply because I believe that we are really on to something that will have significant impacts on rural communities all across our country. Now, Mike mentioned the Butler family. Just about, 2 months ago, maybe, we visited another family. Maybe less than 2 months. It was less than 2 months. A young man, very healthy, who had been working, taking care of his family in Calhoun County, South Carolina. The family name is Johnson. Now, Mr. Johnson is a very proud young man. The woman that Mike mentioned happened to be African American. Mr. Johnson is not African American. He has what we call a double wide, where about 20% of, I think, if Mike will correct me if I'm wrong about this, I believe that per capita, South Carolina has more of these type homes than any other state in the union. And he saw himself losing a lot of who and what he is. He lost his job. And therefore, he was having a real problem making an income for his family. As his unemployment continued, he saw his utility bills continuing to rise. He went in for a consultation with his co-op, and when he sat down, they decided to take a look at his situation to see whether or not he was a good candidate for this program. It turns out that it was. And he went into the program, and his $400 a month utility bill, after all of the retrofitting, though it's allowed, the program allows up to $9,000. With him, he only needed around $6,500 to do everything that needed to be done. But when it was over, he saw his utility bill drop to less than $200 a month. But what is even more telling is that to pay off his loan was less than $70 a month. So he saw not just a saving, but he saw a net increase in his household income of around $140 every month. This kind of effort is as laudatory as anything that I have seen since I've been in government. Not just here. I'm winding up 20 years here in Washington, but I spent 30 years as state and local governments in South Carolina. In the 50 years that I've been in and out of these kinds of situations, I have not seen anything that I have ever considered to be more positive, more positively impactful upon families. And that's why I have pushed CBO, I've pushed the White House, the president himself, to really take a hard look at this program and really nationalizing this program in a way that it would be beneficial for everybody. We're talking about around $5 billion for the entire country. And we're talking about a net, on the worst case scenario that I've seen over the 10-year period, a net of around $1 billion, if that. We think this is an effort worth everybody joining in. Now, it has bipartisan support. We didn't pass this out of the House because we didn't have the votes. Co-sponsoring the bill with me was Congressman Whitfield from Kentucky. And it had bipartisan co-sponsorship over in the Senate. So the bill is very nonpartisan, or bipartisan, I would rather say, because it demonstrates what can be done if we use a little bit of creativity. Now, you see a lot of headlines coming out of South Carolina that I'm not particularly proud of. But this one, if we get it moving the way it should, will wipe away all the other stuff that you'll read about this, because it's not really consequential to families the way this is. Now, coupled with this is another effort that I want to bring to your attention today, and then I'll answer any questions you may have. Now that my staff is here, we can answer questions. I promise to respond to all your questions, and I might answer one or two. When we were putting together the recovery package, the stimulus bill, if you please, I was very, very concerned about rural communities getting the kind of attention that they needed. I don't mind telling you that it was a tough battle. One example happens to be broadband. When we were putting that bill together, I was insisting that rural communities get treated equally to urban communities with broadband investments. When the bill left the House, it had $5 billion in it for broadband, 2.5 to be handled by the Department of Agriculture, and 2.5 by the Department of Commerce. And it went over to the Senate. When the bill came back from the Senate, they had plussed up the $5 billion to $7 billion. But it took all of the money out of ag and put the whole $7 billion in the Department of Commerce. Well, I'm just pleased that none of you all were in the room when this came to my attention. And I'm pleased, most especially, that Mike was not in the room, because he might have had a different introduction of me today. But needless to say, we did get our $2.5 billion back. It was one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. But then I pushed for us to pay special attention to rural communities, especially those communities with low income. And if you look in the rural development section of the bill, you'll see that we put in a little formula in rural development we call 10, 20, 30. Now that simply means that in that section of the bill, 10% of the funds must be directed to those communities where 20% or more of the population have been living beneath the poverty level for the last 30 years. 10, 20, 30. And with a little gentle persuasion, we adopted it. It's in the bill. Now, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it until I got an invitation to come to Marion County, South Carolina, to the little community of Britton's Neck. They wanted to break ground on their new water system. So I agreed to be there for the groundbreaking. I really wasn't focused at all on the formula until the gentleman from Marco Water System got up before the group and said that we have been trying to get water in this community for 50 years. We're finally here today to break ground on 51 miles of water lines. And the reason we're able to do that is because of this little 10, 20, 30 formula that's in the rural development section of the Department of Agriculture. I was sitting there, looking at my BlackBerry, and I just kind of popped up. And I said to myself, I said, I know what we did, but I never really focused on water. I was focused on other stuff. But I should have been focused on water because I was invited later on to go to Williamsburg County, which vies with Marion every month to be leading our state in unemployment, in low income, sometimes 17.5%. Over in Williamsburg County, they got 2 water systems because 10, 20, 30. And later on, I was invited to go to Orangeburg County, which leads the nation. It's always in the top 10 of the poorest counties in our country of its populations of 65,000 or more. And they got 2 water systems that they've been trying to get for decades. Working together, 10, 20, 30, that the president has now adopted as a concept, that CBO says it does not violate their sensibilities, and programs like the Rural Energy Savings Program. We can see significant impacts on rural communities all over our country. I'll close with who these people are. When I'm talking about South Carolina and maybe Mississippi and Alabama, we're talking basically about African Americans. But when I'm talking about Kentucky and West Virginia, Appalachia, which is in one dictionary that I've read, is another word for white. When I'm talking about Native Alaska, South Dakota, these communities are Native Americans. In Phoenix, Santa Fe, they are basically Hispanic Americans. So we are not talking about anything that's directed toward any one group. We're talking about directed at everybody who live below the poverty level. There are 474 counties in the United States of America that fall in this category. 2/3 of those counties are represented by Republicans. So there's nothing partisan about it. In fact, if anything, I'm on the minority side when it comes to this. What are we talking about now is trying to get the resources that this country has into communities that really need them. Finally, I sat down a few years ago with some researchers at the University of New Mexico at Santa Fe. And I was particularly interested in what was going on in Santa Fe because my congressional district, that I know the history of very, very well. If you go to that congressional district, travel along I-95, you'll run across a little a town called Cooperative. You'll go through a little river called Pocataligo, another river, Santee, Ellery, Utah Springs, all Native Americans. So I was particularly interested in what they were doing in New Mexico because I saw communities just like mine. So I asked them, tell me a little bit about what you're doing because I would like to really be better equipped to do things in my congressional district. The researcher said this to me. They said, oh, for all that you can do, just take a look at these books on this wall. We were in a room. It was really for researchers. Had no windows. They were just books. All the walls were made out of books, or covered with books. They said to me, at the turn of the last century, life expectancy in this country was less than 50 years. At the turn of this century, life expectancy had gotten over 70 years. They said that 90% of the contributor to that 20-year extension in life expectancy is the water we drink. It's the water we drink. I should have been thinking about water when I wasn't thinking about water. But I don't miss a day today when I don't think about water. Thank you, and I'm answering the question, Mayor. We have electric co-ops, we have telephone co-ops, we have water co-ops. These co-ops, I really believe, are the ways to really get communities to buy in to their own their future growth and development. So the whole cooperative approach could be used in all of these areas, in my opinion. I invited faith leaders from all over my state, and I had a bigger turnout than I expected. I told them we were going to meet at 8 o'clock in Columbia, and people came from as far away as Edisto Island. And at 8 o'clock, they were there. And they were there because they are really concerned about what is being said to them by their congregants. I call them constituents this morning, but I don't think that works well for the church. And they brought up housing. And I brought an expert in. As you know, there's a lot of money bottled up from TARP and other places to work on houses. And there's a way for replacement housing to get into some of these programs, but nobody is focused on it. And thankfully, the expert that was there today did focus on that, the fact that some families can use, I think it's up to $65,000, I believe it is, for a little more creative thing than just fixing your mortgage. I think that rural housing is something that I've been involved with long before I came to Congress. I used to be the executive director of the South Carolina Commission for Farm Workers. It was an issue, Rural Housing Alliance. I was involved with all of those self-help housing. I ran 4 self-help housing programs in South Carolina. So the housing thing is something that I'm very in tune with, and I always look for ways to do housing when we can. And I really believe we ought to keep that in the forefront, because you're right. We saw at one time, I gave up on this fight because I thought that there were bad investments. And I had some discussions, and I learned not to have those discussions anymore. So what we're trying to do now, and I think the right thing to do, is to try to make them energy efficient. Because people, it's a culture that I've found that you're not going to win on. Some people, that's the way to go with them, and you just have to try to make the best of it. So it can make them energy efficient, but I do not believe that you're going to change the culture.